From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. We're returning Thursday as this episode comes out with our weekly listener mail segment. Now, as you know, August can be a little bit of a crazy time here in conspiracy land, so we had some classics that we hope you enjoyed as much as we do. And now we are back with one of our favorite parts of the show, messages from your fellow conspiracy realists. As always, longtime listeners, it is a bit of a challenge for us to only pick a few. We hope that you find these as fascinating as we do. We're going to get to some weird places. We're going to talk a little bit about ancient aliens. We're going to talk a little bit about obscure religious movements that you may or may not apply the C word to. and then what better way for us to kick it off by talking a little bit more about the surveillance state. I've got some personal experience with this one, but we've always had this long-running joke for years. Matt, this was back in the YouTube days. Our hapless intern Steve, and sometimes we'll be on calls, and I'll say something like, "Well, guys, just between us, the three of us, and whoever is at the NSA listening right now, here's the straight poop." Yes, stop saying straight poop. That strange news got in my head. But we were lucky enough to receive an email. No, it stood out to you. It stood out to me. I think it stood out to you too, Matt. Someone actually, well, I don't want to spoil the surprise. They may have met their Steve.
Yeah, it's right. It's a good yarn here. I have no reason not to believe the veracity of these events as recounted by our listener, Janky Jay. And there are definitely some details that I'm going to have to kind of edit out here on the fly as not to endanger anybody's livelihood. But let's get to it. This is interesting. So the subject line is, I met my intern, Steve, that was previously monitoring me. My spouse and I got married while I was still completing my undergraduate degree. He was stationed in Japan on a ship that shall not be named. Said ship is quite old, but equipped with defensive weaponry intended for ballistic missiles. Let's just call it in the aughts, somewhere abouts, this ship was monitoring North Korea and that general area of the ocean, mostly on its own with some other friends. At the time, North Korea was amping up its weapons testing, firing missiles in a display of aggression. You might remember that Trump later went for peace talks that, quote, officially ended the Korean War. So the ship in question here was instrumental in preventing any missiles from striking the U.S. if North Korea decided to, say, try to hit nearby Guam or Hawaii. At the same time, I'd gotten weirdly obsessed with K-pop. Heard you there, BTS in particular, and needed a history cultural course to complete my undergrad degree. Why not take Korean studies? As part of my Korean history class, we had to watch hours and hours of North Korean propaganda on YouTube and other sites to understand and study the North and South Korean culture. You see where this is going? I think we do, Janky Jay. Meanwhile, my husband had been out at sea for nearly 3 years, and we hadn't seen each other after our very quick courthouse marriage about a year before this. So he did some rather sneaky and most definitely not allowed moves to secretly call me in the depths of the night while his ship was in the middle of the ocean. We knew that our phone calls would most likely be intercepted by both the U.S. government, China, and any other nearby country, so we never spoke about anything related to the military, etc. Just said, I miss you, I love you, bye, etc. He would also sneak an email to me every once in a while. The ship did not have internet access. He had to use a specific restricted computer to send the email. Again, probably not allowed. As my semester goes on, I start to notice that our internet is slow and acting strange and crashing, particularly when I tried to watch the North Korean propaganda I needed for my class. I don't know why, but we watched so much of it. Though we contacted the internet company, and they sent a tech out to check it. They said it was nothing wrong on their end. Then I noticed that my camera light for my laptop was always on, no matter what. This is a time before Zoom and such as well. My laptop was old, so I didn't think much of it. Other strange things via our internet occur, and my husband actually joked that my IP address was being monitored by the DoD in an email. He's not part of any form of intelligence, etc., so he wouldn't have actually known. I went to some site on Google, and I don't know if the site was reputable, but they claimed that it would tell you if you were being monitored, and DoD popped up. Honestly, I shrugged it off and went about my business. I wasn't doing anything wrong anyway. Fast forward to early, somewhere in the aughts, I graduated and moved out to a city in Japan, a small city. I'm going to strike the name of the city as well. We were living in a cute Japanese house a few miles off the base, and the base was rather small, with a general population of around 1,000 people, depending on what ships were in harbor. And like most small towns, most people knew each other. There's a strip of bars right off the base that all the military folks hang out at after work. While most ships claimed a particular bar as their own, there were a few bars that were fair game for anyone. I honestly don't remember the name of said bar, but everyone knew their Long Island iced teas were 99% liquor and also 300 yen, or $3. There were old car seats for chairs. There was Japanese screamo punk music blasting. And it was run by an attractive and feisty woman that wouldn't hesitate to hit you with a pool cue if you misbehaved. I love this. So here's the kicker. Anyway, during a long drunken night, my spouse and I are chatting up a group of sailors when one points at me and exclaims, "I know you." But I didn't know him. He went on to explain that he monitored me and my internet usage because they thought I was a North Korean sympathizer with connections to said ship, in charge of watching North Korea at the time. And that it would be dangerous if I had convinced someone on the ship to, I don't know, let a missile slip through or something along those lines. I got the impression that said person was blackout drunk, but he was most definitely recalling things from my search history and personal emails that no one else would ever have known about, because obviously I didn't believe him at first and questioned him on details, including which K-dramas I've been watching. He had strong opinions that I was watching very good ones. He talked to me like I was an old friend, and I got the impression that they were no longer monitoring me because he was curious as to what I've been up to lately and how I ended up in Japan. He went on to laugh about how I was only watching those propaganda videos because of a college course I was taking. He agreed that that made a lot of sense and would, quote, add it to my profile, whatever that means. Over the next year of me living there, I didn't see the guy again, though people in the military move quite a lot, and I didn't spend much time at those Navy bars. I will always wonder what kind of information they have on me and where/if it is kept. Guess I'll never know. I really doubt they continue to monitor me, as it was very situational, and in hindsight, I find it really funny. Who knows? Maybe you'll run into your intern, Steve, at a bar one day. Best, Janky Jay. I find this like the hook at the end of a ghost story, guys. This is chilling stuff to me. I don't know how you took it, but it gives me the creeps in a very real way.
Well, yeah, it reminds you that your relationships are really important, right? Over the years when we've talked about surveillance that's occurring even on a metadata level from, the early aughts, it was often about correspondence between you, maybe whoever you are, probably in the U.S., and somebody else who is not in the U.S., right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Or you, a non-military person, and someone you're in a relationship with who is within the military of some country. That's often where you're going to get a lot of that surveillance. I don't know. It's certainly eerie.
What are the chances?
Without giving too many specifics away, Janky, as requested, we're hoping to do our best to preserve some anonymity here. But without getting into those specifics, this is a somewhat extraordinary case because of your closeness to the physical location of where the people monitoring you were based. So that's not going to happen for most people. And as you pointed out beautifully, Matt, we've discussed this at length in the past. They're looking at relationships. So if you want to trust, of all voices out there on the internet, you could trust me with this one. The surveillance stuff is not specifically just like looking at your search history one time. right? Because there are countless students, there are countless professionals, there are countless, let's just be honest about it, folks, there are countless people who are like stoned at 3 a.m. and get really interested in something very specific that looks sketchy and search history. But what tipped you, Janky, outside of automated surveillance, like Hoover vacuum level surveillance that happens to everybody, what tipped you is the communication you were having with a military asset. And I'll just keep it very vague when I say asset there. That is that is what got the attention of a human intern, Steve.
Well, and also the repeated viewing of propaganda videos paired with that.
Okay, but if this intern, Steve, was aware of that search history and all of the shows that were being viewed on whatever device Janky Jay was using, right? That's a lot of information you've got. How was the piece of information missing that Janky was enrolled in classes? Because there's online portals for all that stuff in these years. Yeah, but there's online portals in these years, and they're looking at her internet.
I see history. You're saying.
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, there would be other evidence of the
yeah. I've got the answer to that one, Matt. So the thing is that I'm trying to say this diplomatically. I want to be careful, but there is a known pipeline, an established pipeline between students in different countries and in different fields and tradecraft, spycraft, espionage, whatever you want to call it, the spooky stuff, right? The fun stuff. So that's why, for example, you will have people in grad school who get directly tapped into working for Uncle Sam's intelligence apparatus. The same thing can happen. Like a lot of foreign students can sometimes be under suspicion, perhaps unfairly, because of their country of origin. Okay. And like, that's why there are things like, obviously there are U.S. intelligence assets right now who are surveilling stuff like the Confucius Institutes. Do you know what those are, guys? Confucius Institutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. They're soft power Chinese culture centers. Yeah. In the U.S. especially. And there is for a very long time, there has been a known pipeline with intelligence or counterintelligence activities and students. They're perfect for a lot of, they have a lot of the ingredients you want for a good operation. And that's like, I don't know, I guess we don't think about it as often in the United States, but for another example, look at Latin America. The theater of Latin America is full of examples of university students who may have been aided by a foreign power that wanted to, topple a regime or wanted to move a certain policy along. Stuff gets dirty, stuff gets muddy. So it's probably
and the U.S. government learned a lot from SDS and stuff from Vietnam War era.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Maybe my answer is too long here, but this, I think, is a pretty clear answer to why they didn't just say, oh, it's a kid who is maybe in a Korean studies class or a Korean history class, because, if anything, oddly enough, as counterintuitive as that may sound, seeing that education history may have just exacerbated the concern rather than reduced it.
They're just podcasters that talk about this stuff on a regular basis.
Yeah, but the impetus for even looking into the traffic were those off-book emails that were very, that you could maybe even interpret. They were so banal and kind of like they were making efforts to like be as like, vanilla as possible, that maybe that looks suspicious in and of itself. Like, is there some sort of code being used here? Because there's such little actual information being exchanged.
Right. And that's a good point, Noel, because oddly enough, being vague like that and just checking in with your loved one, it accomplished the opposite of what you probably wanted to do here, Janky. And so glad that you all are okay. And I'm very happy that this story had a funny ending. I also want to give a shout out to anybody who said, add that to your profile. That's kind of a weird joke, not joke. It's kind of like if you ask people who work in a trauma center or who work in a very busy ER, you ask them something funny, like what's something funny that happens at your job? And you realize very quickly they have a different sense of humor based on their experiences. The stuff they find funny is probably not what the audience of America's Funniest Home Videos would find hilarious. And the same thing can happen in the sphere of intelligence. But you always have to assume that what you're saying is, or what you're writing, or what you're communicating, or what you're looking at is somehow observable to someone else that you may not always be able to observe on your end. And maybe that can be spooky, but it's just sort of a better safe than sorry thing. People can also get hacked into for absolutely no reasons. Sometimes it's just like a numbers game. We'll see what we can get, right? Sometimes there might be ransomware, but to be targeted for surveillance, passive or whatever, surveillance by an intelligence agency, that you usually have to hit more than one switch. You usually have to tick more than one box. And it's not necessarily sinister. It's not necessarily people being out to get you. It's kind of like when you were a kid walking around your neighborhood and your neighbor heard something and they just walked out to get a look at you. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean they're going to arrest you.
Yeah.
But it's still... It's like a yellow light. How about that? It's a yellow card. It doesn't take you out of the game. Like we recently...
Ben, are you talking about what just happened at my house? Like just right before we started rolling? Because that just happened.
That just how you heard a noise, you walked up? Yeah.
Oh, no. It was my neighbor. Or I guess my neighbor's father was just standing out at the end of the driveway when I walked out with the dogs. Mm-hmm. And he was just standing there at the end of the driveway. And I was like, just gave him one of those little head nods. I was like, I don't know you. Okay, hi. Well, what are you doing right here? Just staring at my house. It was just somebody's father being sweet. But in my mind, I was like, why? You looking at me?
What do you want with me? But I don't want to TED talk this or monopolize this, but something similar, Janky, you might be not quite to your level, but something similar just happened to me unexpectedly before I got back into the States. So you never know, but your location and the location of the person you're communicating with are one of the biggest things. You can talk all the trash you want about Tehran, for instance, but if you are talking that trash in an email to someone in Tehran or someone in the stands, then they're going to pay a little more attention to that. So glad everybody was safe. And it sounds like you have a lot of adventures. So Steve's out there, if you're listening. And if you feel like you can contact us securely, if you're okay with it, we'd love to hear your side of these war stories. What do you guys think about that? We want to hear from some surveillors.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Do you drive a silver GMC SUV with California plates? Call us. We want to know your story.
And with that, we'll take a quick pause and then be back with some more messages from you.
And we have returned with something interesting that I anticipate will create a cool conversation with us. And to be clear about my ulterior motive, I'm sharing this story from Al because I think it can help inform a future episode. So here we go. Hello, my friends. You can call me Al. I guess we can do a bodyguard thing too. So Al says, I've listened to your show for a while now, and someone I've heard mentioned several times on Stuff They Don't Want You to Know, as well as some sister shows, is Emanuel Swedenborg. It catches my attention every time because I was raised in a church called the General Church of the New Jerusalem, a religion also known as Swedenborgianism. I can't say I completely subscribe to its beliefs, but it takes its ideas from the works of Emanuel Swedenborg. And these books are seen as the second coming of God through Swedenborg. It's a fairly small religion, says Al, but it's always been fascinating to me. The level of devotion this group of people find in one man's writings. I myself have read at least parts of his books, and they actually have some extremely interesting ideas in them. I went to an extremely small private school based on this religion, and Swedenborg's books were the basis of our religion classes, and they were brought into almost every other class we had as well. I don't mean to diss on the religion or your brief mentions of Swedenborg. Thanks, Al. But the difference between this religion, which holds them to be a revered prophet, and outside people who see him as just another generic psychic is quite interesting to me. I'm not sure exactly what the point of this email was, but I thought I could offer some perspective on the guy as someone who grew up in a religion centered around him. I also wonder what other obscure religions there are that have similar origins to this one. And then Al ends saying, P.S. One of my favorite books by Swedenborg is called Earths in the Universe, also known by some other long name I can't remember. But it's a fascinating read and talks about spirits and aliens on other planets in our solar system, as well as other unknown planets. His writing takes a bit to get used to and can be confusing, but even removed from the religious context, I still suggest giving it a look. It can be quite entertaining. Al. So Al, thank you. I'm considering this an official recommendation for the Stuff They Don't Want You to Know book club, which I think could be a lot of fun.
Just glancing through his bibliography, they all sound fascinating.
Yeah, really this stood out to me because Swedenborg reminds me in some ways of other prophetic figures like Edgar Cayce, who I think we may have done a YouTube episode on or something many years ago, but I can't remember. It might just be something we all talked about for a while, but it brings us to kind of, I don't know, it feels like a good setup for the origins of religions that are sometimes considered fringy, maybe, or not as well known. As like the Abrahamic religions or as Hinduism and Buddhism and all the other big ones. For some people, Swedenborg was really controversial. He's active from the he's born in the late 1600s. He's active into the late 1700s. He lived to be 84. And right now, he's best known for a book he published in 1758 called Heaven and Hell. You would call him kind of a Renaissance man these days, theologian, scientist, philosopher, and yes, mystic. So for a lot of our more skeptical listeners, just calling someone a mystic might seem like it already damages their credibility. But his story is really interesting to me, and it makes me want us to look at more examples of kind of self-proclaimed prophets that were maybe non-canonical. Because, most people are familiar with the prophets that are listed in older established religions, right? But there is a proliferation of people who are non-canonical prophets. Like they and their followers consider them Christian adjacent prophets, or even, prophets of another religion that the status quo just thinks of as regular people, or maybe heretics. This guy thought he was divinely inspired. He didn't really get started on this until he was 53 years old in 1741. And he didn't spend his whole life being like a charismatic thinker and preacher. He started to have these crazy dreams and visions when he was in his 50s, especially one Easter weekend in 1744. And he believed, and I have no reason to question this belief, I don't think he was after the money. He believed that the biblical Jesus Christ had divinely appointed him to reform Christianity, the whole thing. And he had these powers, again, from his statements, that he could visit heaven and hell, he could speak with angels, and he would... Well, here's the thing. He predicted the end of the world. I think the three of us saw that maybe in the cards. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2022, November.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Mm-hmm.
What?
No? No, I'm just joking. I don't know when he predicted the world will end.
Jesus, you had me going there. Nothing like a end of the world prophecy to get you a little stressed out.
Yeah, I'm being, you know what, I'm editorializing a little bit because he actually said, if I understand this correctly, he actually said the last judgment had already occurred in 1777, but he went ahead and published another work in 1758 concerning the New Jerusalem and its heavenly doctrine. And right now, there is a little bit of a debate over whether all of his works are divinely inspired or whether just a few are. But as you pointed out, Al, we will call you Al, this did inspire a movement that continues today. The new church is actually a group term. There are several different historically related denominations of Swedenborgianism. And I don't know. So this is where my American comes out, right? I believe in religious plurality. I think if you're not hurting anyone, then you should be able to believe what you like. But Swedenborgianism has some criticisms, and they're historic. They date back to the 1700s. But just with all this now, all this information we have now, I've got to ask you guys, Matt, Noel, Matt, what do you think about the idea of someone being divinely inspired and accruing followers in this regard? Are we all very skeptical about it, or where do we stand on the spectrum here?
It's super hard to disprove. How do you disprove if someone is actually being communicated with by some other entity?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to do it. You could question that person. You could give them a truth serum even. You could hook them up to a polygraph, and if the person truly believes it, then you're going to get the same results, right? Even if it's not true. It's very odd.
Yeah, I hear you, man. Like the idea here is that, I don't know, one of fairness, one of letting other people do as they will, but I think it only really becomes dangerous when that leader, whomever they are, is directing people to act against their own physical, emotional, or psychological interest. And I feel like that's a very easy line to draw because there are numerous alternative, you would call them religions, where people are just fine. It gives them the spiritual solace they need. They're not hurting themselves or anybody else. I feel like with that in mind, we can totally say, let's go for it. But I also think I want to get in contact with Al. I'm actually going to do that later, Al. So act surprised, unless Swedenborg predicted it. Want to get some more understanding of the idea that he had spiritual or psychic powers. This was much more common actually back in the day than it was in later centuries. Like there was this proliferation of people who felt divinely inspired, or they made predictions, or they claimed to be clairvoyant. And ever since that time, there have also been people who have said that it's bunk, which, to be clear, we're not doing yet. But would you guys be interested in exploring these kind of lesser known spiritual leaders?
Yes, 1,000,000%. I mean, this guy, his list of works, the names are just in and of themselves is fascinating. Doctrine of the Lord, Doctrine of the Sacred Scripture, Apocalypse Revealed, Divine Providence, Interaction of the Soul and the Body. Like, there's just so much to unpack here. And I think, even like something like Baha'i faith, more modern prophets. I think there is something for an episode in that kind of stuff. Absolutely.
It's weird. It's weird to think that there are probably just as many people today, if not way more, who feel this. Ben, just to your point of like, it was more common back in the day for people to be divinely inspired or feel divinely inspired. I think now we just label it as some kind of mental health crisis or issue, rather than what we would consider someone who truly felt divinely inspired, right? Or was hearing voices of another from a higher power.
Yeah, and part of that is, the spread of mass media and ubiquitous communication. Swedenborg's so interesting because what you're describing, Matt, that is something he experienced as well. A lot of his peers thought, wow, this guy has lost it, right? They say he's no longer mentally fit. The church of the time actively opposed him. And like you pointed out, Al, a lot of people didn't get his writing because it's pretty, if you've read it, if you've read some of it, I haven't read all of it, obviously, but if you've read some of it, then you'll see that it's very involved. It's very articulate. It can be very advanced. And he is actually responsible for inspiring a lot of things, a lot of movements that would be much more recognizable to the average person today. Like you can see claims that he sort of paved the way for the spiritualism movement. He also had several stories that people went back and forth on when he was alive that were anecdotes about his psychic abilities. I think the most famous one was in 1759. He claimed that he saw a huge fire in Stockholm, Sweden, while he himself was 300 miles away, that he was instantly aware of it. You know, obviously this is before Twitter, so he wasn't just reading retweets, or they were divine retweets. I'm not sure where we land with that. But with this, again, he reminds me of Edgar Casey. He also has whether or not you believe it, he has a very developed understanding of what he sees as the afterlife, the nature of reality, and heaven and hell. He believes in he believes in both of those things. Like Christianity is very much the base. So what I'd want to talk about here is I want to really explore the idea that he may have had strange powers, or that people believe he did. And some people believe even now. So we're going to keep this one short. And before we go to our next commercial break, we'll just say, Al, expect us. To quote anonymous. We won't be anonymous. You'll know it's us. And then we also would also love to hear from all of our fellow conspiracy realists, other folks that you think may be examples of a Swedenborg-like figure in the world or throughout history, right? So the Edgar Caseys, the Swedenborgs, maybe even the Lead Skalman, the Coral Castle guy. That might be another one. But we looked into that. There's a whole period of history that is often ignored in the mainstream. And let's dive into it and let's see what we can find if we separate the fact from the fiction and find some clarity in the controversy. So let us know, 1-833-STD-WYTK. Hit us up, conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. Read every email we get, but don't do it yet, because we're pausing. A word from our sponsor, and we'll be back with more stories from you.
All right, we're back, guys. We're gonna call this segment "Bunk or Skunk," as in weed. Is skunk weed good or bad?
Skunk
I think it's good. Is it bad?
I always thought it just meant it was really, really strongly smelling.
That's what I thought,
I don't know.
too.
Yeah,
okay.
You know what?
Just goes to show.
That's probably what it is. It's about the smell. So it could be bad. It could be good. I think it depends on your region. Yeah.
Well, either way, it rhymes. So we're going to decide if this next idea, this thought experiment, is bunk or skunk. This is silly. Okay. This is a message we received from the Baron Upon Eaton. And this is what the Baron said. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Baron Upon Eaton. I keep calling him that. He just says Baron Eaton. This is Baron Eaton. Emailing this time because it might be a ramble, and honestly, a grand unified conspiracy theory needs to be woven by the word, not by speech. After listening to the episode about the rainwater becoming dangerous, remember we talked about that? The forever chemicals in the rainwater? It made me think of what this sounded like in my memory banks. Venus. Okay, we're going to keep going with you, Baron. Then the eldritch horror showed up and poked my squishy human brain. What if the Bible itself wasn't about the creation of Earth, but instead the terraforming of Earth by the ancient aliens, which eventually became us? What if we can't find the missing link because the link never existed? We had to escape Venus to terraform Earth, much like how we look to terraform Mars after messing up the Earth to this point. Guys, full stop. That thought, I've never had it before. That's
Really?
intense. I've never had the thought that Venus specifically was the planet from whence humanity may have come, or intelligent life may have come.
It's a hot take.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, it's been there. People have thought about this in the past. It's actually, part of it is due to the proximity of Venus and Mars to Earth, right? And, you're familiar with the Mars stuff, the idea that what is human life now, or what is Earth life came from Mars.
But see, that makes way more sense to me. The Mars thing makes sense to me because of how similar it is to planet Earth when it comes to the rocky, like super rocky formation. The temperature difference isn't as nuts. It seems as though there was at least water on Mars at some point. Venus just feels like such a different story. Anyway, we're going to get into that. Let's continue with what Baron says. Baron says, what if our ancestors knew we would do this again and left the Bible as a record on how they terraformed Earth, but had to cloak it in religion after everything sort of fell apart? One can only imagine what would happen on Mars if the technology faded after the terraforming was completed. It's a really interesting idea, too. The only reason I really tied all this together was the ancient Greek story of the humans who traveled into space and fought alongside the king of the moon to fight the king of Venus. So, like, they teamed up with the king of the moon to fight the king of Venus.
Finally.
Baron says, a true story, satire for sure, but what if? Then we throw in the tales of sentient sky whales in Venus's atmosphere because, of course, they would exist. This opens the door for the dolphin Illuminati, our overlords of this world, who keep an eye out on us for their masters, the reptilians, who, of course, reside inside the hollow moon. And that is how an idle Monday ruined my life and opened my mind up to terrible space horrors that should not be recognized.
Oh. Baron, I got something for you. I got something for you guys too here. Okay, first off, awesome letter. Thank you for writing. I actually prefer the emails because, you can get links with them and you could go back and you do all this neat stuff with them. But this is something I'm not sure how to say this. Okay. There are some people who are interested in something related to what you're thinking about, Baron, and the identity of these people may surprise you. It wasn't too long ago, back in 2016, when NASA themselves came out with a climate model that said Venus may have been a habitable planet for Earth-like life for up to 2 billion years of its initial history. We're talking liquid ocean, habitable surface temperature, all the good stuff, all the works. Still, that's basically a model. And one of the, simply put, this is oversimplifying it, one of the concerns or one of the questions about that model for a lot of people is whether some kind of ecological disaster or an accretion of greenhouse gases led to what we know as Venus today, which is very much not a fun, happy place for humans.
Yeah, because the Venus in the atmosphere, it is going through a runaway greenhouse effect. That's one of the primary reasons why people think that, right? So if you check out more information from NASA, you learn that, this is stuff that we learned a long time ago, probably in our elementary schools, but Venus is known as Earth's twin, or is referred to as Earth's twin. It doesn't mean they're exactly identical, but the density of both planets and the size of both planets is relatively similar, right? And it's that atmosphere thing that for a long time just made people think, oh, that thing is, nothing can live on that thing. It's got this super thick atmosphere.
It's toxic.
Yeah. Carbon dioxide, though, is one of the primary things that makes it up.
Well, also like clouds of sulfuric acid.
Yeah, that's not good. That's generally not good.
None of this is particularly screaming, human habitability, right?
Yeah,
not with that attitude. It's a horrible neighborhood.
But it is weird to think that it's the hottest planet in our solar system, especially when Mercury is so much closer to the sun.
Venus is so hot right now.
Dude, really quickly. I just was Googling, just trying to get the composition of the atmosphere, and I just found this article on the conversation. Just going to read the headline. We could talk about it or move on, but I think it's a valid addition. Ancient Earth had a thick, toxic atmosphere like Venus until it cooled off and became livable.
That's the other part. Yeah. Because even those climate models that you were referencing, Matt, that you and I are talking about, they don't know exactly, okay, if there were some kind of liquid water friendly environment in Venus, other atmospheric aspects aside, people don't know right now what would have changed and created that positive feedback loop of an more and more hostile environment. And again, that's very Earth-centric, if not anthrocentric, for everybody, because there may be some kind of form of life on Venus right now, and they think Earth is a garbage neighborhood. It's all about perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, they just have to withstand 900-degree surface temperatures. It's fine. Which is hot enough to melt lead, by the way. And what was the other thing? It was the air pressure. It's crazy. Air pressure currently on Venus, because of the situation above the surface, is about 90 times that of Earth, which really got my mind going, you guys. Because I'm imagining the surface pressure would have been relatively the same, right? What air pressure would have changed, but it still would have been super heavy there. And I imagined, what if something lived in that pressure and then it decided to exit that planet and go somewhere else? Would it need to recreate that pressure in order to survive? Does that make sense with humans?
Right.
We have to, if we're going to travel down into the ocean, we have to create technology that will protect our fragile meat bodies from the pressures involved, right?
Yeah, and it goes both ways, right? Like deep sea creatures would ostensibly, logically, it follows that they would need special equipment to survive without those enormous pressures, those pounds per square inch, PSI or whatever. But I do want to say, in defense of that poor blobfish whose picture gets taken all the time on the surface world, that poor guy looks a lot better when he's in his natural environment. You caught him on a bad day.
Yeah. Well, in that natural environment, that's what I want to talk about. So the equivalent of that 90 times air pressure of Earth is to roughly 1.6 kilometers or 5,280 feet below the ocean, right? Now, this section of the ocean is called the Midnight Zone, or the Bathypelagic Zone. Maybe that's how you say it. It's between 3,300 feet and 13,100 feet. So it's a nice little zone beneath the ocean where these pressures exist, the equivalent pressures of the surface of Venus. My thought was, you guys, what if they observed Earth and noticed that the pressures they would need to live in comfortably do exist on Earth? It's just you have to go under the ocean to find them and live amongst those pressures. And then they went down that far and built structures to continue their civilization. And those suckers are the ones we keep seeing in the skies. Boom, case closed. We figured it all out, guys. It was Venus the whole time.
We got them, folks. Yeah, especially because Congress just put out a very tantalizing statement regarding UAP. Matt, I feel like we're almost there. I think we're 98% there. There's that 2% might just be really important for us to think through, because one of the big questions is, why would there not have been more communication? Did something happen to those life forms or entities? Did the timeline aspect of real life events being transformed over time into religion, to folklore, to myth, right? Which are all, religion, folklore, and myth are very closely related. I don't want to ruffle any feathers, you know what I mean? But they are psychologically, they're very closely related, and sociologically. So it is true, we're helping build this case here, it is true that there are a lot of real world inspirations for things that later become folklore and become myth and indeed become religions, we would need to really think through the timeline, because if we're talking about billions of years, right, then we're also then challenging some current assumptions about human beings, because human beings had, like, what was it? The ones that look like you, if you're human and listening now, they came out of the African continent, as we call it today, about 300,000 years ago, but they didn't start exhibiting what we would call modern behavior, behavioral modernity, cognitive traits that we associate with modern humans. They didn't get that until like almost 150,000 years later. So that would mean that for more than 300,000 years, there had to be some kind of knowledge of this thing that somehow got carried through a massive sea change, maybe poor choice of words here, but a massive sea change in human cognition. And I don't know, that's tough. That's tough to get your head around, you know?
It is. I mean, the timescales, you're right, are the big question, or the big thing for me, because if there was an advanced civilization on Venus at some point, how could we possibly have observed it at this point, given the missions that we've sent to Venus, how close we've been to Venus, even if we've taken high resolution pictures of the surface of Venus and mapped the full thing, how would you be able to detect technological structures, advanced structures on the surface of that planet, given that timescale? Because as we know, nature breaks stuff down really quickly,
Yes.
right? So we'd never be able to observe it. At least in all probability, we would never be able to observe it unless it was some massive structure that encompassed a huge area. And for some reason, it didn't break down amongst all the sulfuric acid that's just like hanging out with it at all times on the surface. The other question I have is related to something you already stated, Ben, that greenhouse effect. Like how long has it been going, and what caused it? There's no way for us to know that without modeling it. As you said, we can make a model of Venus's current state and try and run it back, right? And just understand, well, and again, using probability and what we see happening now, this is likely what happened, and we can build those out, but there's many different possibilities. I don't know. It's just really opened my mind up, considering there are 3 major missions heading to Venus in the short term. 2027, there's going to be a mission called Veritas through NASA. In the late 2020s, there's going to be one called Da Vinci. And there's another one titled ESA Venus Express. That one just happened. And that one was like 2016, I think, when it concluded. But then there's another one happening. So there's a lot of looking at Venus happening right now. Does it make you wonder why, guys? Baron Eaton knows why.
He seems to know something that we don't know, or they don't want us to know. I don't know. I like where your head's at, Baron.
Yeah, I would 100% want to check out Venus as soon as possible. And it's part of the natural sort of evolution of human thought, right? How do you learn more about the world around you? Not for nothing is Venus called sort of one of the sister planets, right, of Earth. Because like you described, Matt, outside of some very obvious, very dangerous differences, Venus does have a lot in common with planet Earth. And, you know, ultimately the goal of life on Earth is and always has been to expand, right? We talked about this earlier, to propagate, to make more of itself. So maybe sooner than we think we'll get some of those answers, or maybe somebody will land on Venus, which has a kind of a younger surface than Earth. Maybe they'll land on Venus and maybe they'll see something that rocks the very foundation of life as we know it. But I saw you got an idea, Matt.
Dude.
Okay. All right.
I got one last idea. Promise I'm not high. I don't do weed.
Matt injected one marijuana once. I saw it. Matt injected one marijuana, and then we did war crime.
Okay, it's a really fun game.
I only do weed subcutaneously. Yeah, it's like a patch.
Not an arc. Just don't do weed. Okay, imagine that just imagine you are one of this advanced civilization on Venus. You have to escape your planet because you really mess things up royally. You see Earth, you figure out, that you can live in that ocean part where the pressure is right. Or with technology you have, maybe even on the surface, you just have to spend a lot of your resources building structures and systems that can sustain your life. What if eventually they figure out a way, after terraforming the planet just a little bit or enough, they figure out a way to rid themselves of that technology necessary to sustain their life so that they can just live on the planet as, fauna, to be creatures of this planet. But what if it's not humanity? What if we're focusing on the wrong type of creature? What if it's, let's say, a sea creature?
I was hoping for fungus. They're like one of my dream picks. They're one of my dream picks for life, like a very advanced fungus. But yeah, I'm with you on sea creatures, man. Amazing, right? Like
like a whale.
Or yeah, maybe. Or even more different.
Or some of those super spooky, deep sea ones.
An octopus. Yeah, there are more deep sea creatures being discovered. Let's just do it. Let's throw the budget into getting a submarine and explore the oceanic depths.
Short of that, they did just add Planet Earth, OG Planet Earth, back to Netflix. And one of my favorites of those, and of just about any nature documentary, is the Deep Oceans episode of Planet Earth.
Same.
With like the vampire squid and all. I mean, it's just remarkable. It really is like an alien planet down there.
Remember when we got the box set?
Exactly. I have that thing playing, that specific episode playing in the background so often when I'm researching, especially when I'm really paranoid and I'm thinking, I don't want to watch Netflix. I don't want them knowing where I'm at. I don't want them knowing like how much I like Iron Chef, which actually the original Iron Chef is on Amazon. Sorry, it's free.
Yeah. I need you guys to watch The Rehearsal ASAP. Like, seriously. ASAP.
Right.
I've seen the first episode. It was fabulous.
No,
really
do
good,
it,
Ben. I've only seen the first episode, but I can't wait to watch more. It's wonderful.
I'll do it for you guys.
Terrifying.
What's it about?
It's best the less you know about it, the better.
Just go into it. Don't spoil anything, dude. I know you like spoilers. Don't do it.
All right. Fine.
And you jokers haven't seen Nope yet, have you?
I have
not seen Nope.
I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And it's a movie that the more I talk about with friends and read about, the more I like it more and more and more, and the more I want to see it again. Ben, I will only say this to you about Nathan. I'm just going to throw this out there. Life simulator. Life simulator. Yeah. That's all I'm going to say.
For Rehearsal or for Nope?
For Rehearsal. Life simulator. Well, microcosm. Both. It does kind of apply to both. Nope. I think it's his best movie. And it was getting a little bit lukewarm reviews, but I think a lot of people didn't quite get it. And I certainly didn't immediately, but it rewards, further thought and analysis. And it deals with a lot of themes that we talk about on this show regularly. So I can't wait for you to see it, Ben, so all three of us can talk about it together.
Yep. I want to talk.
Well, I know everything that happens in Nope. I already read the spoilers.
Stop.
Just assume that I'm going to read the spoilers unless you specifically ask me not to, man. That's just how it is. So I will. But
that's a movie that almost is. You almost can't spoil it. You almost can't spoil it for yourself. It's an experiential thing with that movie, I would argue. You can spoil the beats, but when you really see it and then take it all into your noggin, it's a different experience.
And speaking of experiences, if you would like to take a page from the Book of Janky, a page from They Call Him Al, a page from our new favorite Baron, and experience being on this show with us, well, we would love to have you. As they say in the American South, come on down, be a part of the show. We cannot wait to welcome you and share your stories with your fellow conspiracy realists. We try to make it easy. All you have to do is find us online, which is way easier than landing on Venus.
That's right. The internet is one place you can find us, where we are Conspiracy Stuff on Twitter, YouTube, and the other one, Facebook, where we have a Facebook group called Here's Where It Gets Crazy. And then we are Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram. If you don't want to do any of those internet-y things, you can do a slightly less internet-y thing and give us a telephone call.
That's right. It's a story older than my teeth, but as old as my tongue. Call 1-833-STDWYTK. I'm sorry. Just,
No, that's perfect. Keep
I
it in.
freaking love that. I want to use that all the time now. Okay, we have a phone number. It is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, it is a voicemail system. Give us a cool name, not your real name, just for safety, and then say whatever you want. You've got 3 minutes. Please let us know whether or not you give us permission to use your name and voice on one of these listener mail episodes. If you got more to say than can fit in that 3 minutes, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.